Hello and welcome to the video. Before we get started, if you'd like to provide input on future content and get our weekly newsletter, click on our survey. The link will be below. We also have a report on Ethereum 2, along with a bonus report on why you should learn Solidity now. Again, the link will be below. Now on to the video, and thank you. Okay, so this morning I started to listen to the Mograph podcast from yesterday. I think that's when it was streamed live. And their guest was Jules Urbach, who is the CEO of OTOY and the Render Network, which we've been talking about quite a bit on the channel. And learned some interesting things that that have relevance. And they went into first half of they went into more technical stuff about the improvements to the Octane renderer, but there were definitely some things of interest. And if you're interested, especially if you're also interested in rendering, I would recommend that you listen to this podcast. I think you'll find it interesting. Anyway, one thing is they are adding support to Redshift. I think they may have some Arnold support now on the Render network. I'm not 100% sure, but they're trying to add Redshift. The other thing is they're going to be adding the ability to send regular C4D files rather than have to turn them into what they call OBX files, a different format. The other thing is they're going to be working with Unreal. So the Unreal Engine is going to be able to work eventually with the Render network. And here's the important thing, is Render is going to move to Solana. One thing they're going to do is what they call it a wormhole between the current Render network and the new Render network. And I think, or the Solana-based chain. And as we mentioned, they envision a metaverse. They're also talking about a SDK to allow people to build things with a Rust cross compiler. I think I duplicated that. Okay, about the C4D files. The other thing, and I'm going to get back to the nodes in a minute, is when Render combines with Metaplex, which we've also looked at, you're going to have proof of identity, increasing security for the artist in terms of not having their art stolen. And that's going to come from Render and Solana, not from Metaplex per se. Although, as we saw, Metaplex provides you can see a full listing of what you've done with your thing. Getting back to nodes, I know there's an interest in, for some of you who have the machine and horsepower available, to become nodes on the Render network and make the money that we looked at. That's rolling out slowly. Then they have dozens of people lined up to want to be nodes, which is good. But they're slowing it down because they want to get this thing that I thought was so important. I mentioned it twice, to add the regular C4D files. So what are these changes, especially before we get to the metaverse, what do these improvements in Render Network mean? Well, I think it's going to make it more artist friendly. It's going to make it more popular. And what does that mean? That means more people are going to be using it, more money for, well, could be more money for nodes. Remember, it's supply and demand. If it depends on the supply of nodes and horsepower versus the demand to use it. But it could possibly mean that it's a more profitable venture for someone to set up a Render node, which is obviously what they want. They want to grow this into something big. No one does something this ambitious and wants it to be something small. The other thing that, I mean, if you look at their overall vision, they're talking about dynamic NFTs, the metaverse, and that's what Solana is going to allow them to pursue. So, what's interesting, I mean, this is all of interest to me, both from the CG digital art point of view and from the blockchain point of view in terms of, the demand for this network, for being able to, choose, not be say, okay, I want to use the render network. Well, I guess I have to use Octane. No, if you are a Redshift person, if that's your render of choice, then you may want to, then you'll eventually still be able to use Redshift. In terms of the regular C4D, well, that means you don't have to, you can just take your scene. Once you verify that works, one thing he pointed out, Mr. Urbach pointed out, is that if you're going to take a C4D file, make sure the thing works before you submit it. Because one factor that one thing that could be a factor is if you're familiar with these tools, particularly C4D, a lot of people use plugins. One of the most popular, there's a very popular plugin, X Particles, for to produce, all the pyro and particles and all that kind of good stuff. And it's quite popular. Well, from what I gathered listening to the discussion, does not work with the render network. It can even be a simple case as you're using some plugin that is not popularly used on, and so therefore the uh, the render network nodes may not know about it and can't take advantage of it. Another thing that will make this sort of thing easier that he mentions that they're going for more of a universal textures. And let me explain what that is. When you have something in a 3D scene, could be something as simple as a box. It's like originally this gray thing, right? So you need to bring it to life, give it color, and there are ways of doing that. You can apply a texture to it, and it's essentially you build these nodes or these settings that say what color. They can include a noise, various different things to get just the right look that you want this thing to look like. Let's say a particular material, they call home materials, or a particular, let's say, clothing material, or shiny car paint, or whatever the case may be, and then you put it on the thing. And right now, you have the standard textures that come in C4D. You have the Redshift has their own textures. Octane has their own textures. One nice thing these days is they do have conversion methodology. So you can say, oh, I have these standard textures, and I just did this the other night with something I was working on. We have these standard textures. Well, we need to convert it to an Octane texture, and it will do that. But ideally, you should be able to take the textures and just whatever renderer you're using, whatever, maybe even whatever program you're using, because obviously the textures on Unreal Engine are going to be different. So you're going to have differences. If you have a standard that everyone follows, then it will make life a lot easier for artists. So again, these things make life easier for artists. They make it easier for them to use this type of technology. And again, the way things are looking, I think this network is going to grow. Is it going to become eventually Ready Player One? Uh, who knows? Who knows? I think these days I'm more worried that the world outside of the virtual world and Ready Player One is going to get too close to reality. But anyway, so hopefully this has been interesting. I thought it was so interesting. I wanted to bring it to you, and you can look up this podcast. It should be on any of your. It's certainly on iTunes. Uh, it's it's on all the popular podcast places, as well as you can go and probably find it on mograph.com, or at least find a pointer to it. So again, hopefully this has been interesting. Thank you for listening, and I will speak to you next time. Take care.